Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Step Up to the Mic. This is the place for aspiring and established speakers to take the stage, deliver their talks, and bring them directly to you. Today's featured speaker is a trusted advisor. He's a coach. He's a circle keeper and a speaker. And he's the author of Leading into the Age of Wisdom, Reimagining the Future of Work. Please welcome to the show, Brian Gorman.
Thank you, Rory. I want to start with a question, one that has changed how I see everything about work and leadership. What if the real challenge we face today isn't artificial intelligence, but artificial wisdom? We're surrounded by technology that can outcalculate, outanalyze, and even outcommunicate us. But what it can't do is discern. It cannot know what matters. And it's not just discernment. Artificial intelligence only has the ethics that are programmed into it or that exist within that massive data set that it draws from. If the data is biased, its ethics are biased. If the data is biased, its intelligence is biased. If the data is shallow, its understanding is shallow. Artificial intelligence can only learn when it's told it has made a mistake. It has no conscience, no empathy, no shame, no sense of guilt. It is at its best the wisdom of the human head without the connection to the heart or gut. Yes, it can simulate emotion, but it can't feel it. And it cannot love. And that is the dividing line. Love, not the sentimental kind, but the fierce connective energy that honors life, is the force that animates wisdom. It's the language of the soul, the current that brings meaning, purpose, and wholeness into human systems. And that is why human leadership is more important now than ever before. Because while machines can process information, only humans can integrate meaning. And wisdom lives at that intersection where knowledge meets compassion, courage, and conscience. In truth, then, this is not about technology. It's about us, about the human side of this transformation, and how we can lead with clarity, compassion, courage, and fortitude in a world that often feels like it's spinning faster than we can. Today, I want to explore three ideas. First, where we are, which I believe is the end of an era. Second, how we reorient as leaders. And third, how we reimagine the future of work together. Every age eventually outlives its design. The agrarian age gave way to the industrial age. And the industrial age, which shaped our schools, our organizations, our calendars, our society, was built on a few simple assumptions. Control creates order, efficiency creates value, and hierarchy creates safety. For more than a century, that model worked. It gave us predictability. It allowed us to scale our organizations locally, regionally, nationally, and globally. But it also gave us the illusion the humans can be managed like machines. Consider just this one example. The very idea of the Monday to Friday 8-hour work week, or Monday to Friday 8-hour workday, was introduced by Henry Ford in 1926 to support the manufacture of the Model T. He experimented, he did research, he found that a longer workday or a 6-day work week only contributed slightly to increased productivity. Almost 100 years later, That same rhythm defines how most people work, even though our work is no longer building Model Ts on an assembly line. We are living in a 21st century world operating with 20th century logic built for 19th century factories. And it's not just work hours. Our measurement of productivity, our fixation on busyness, and our dependence on top-down decision-making all come from that same industrial mindset. The pandemic made this visible. People began asking, why am I working this way? For what? For whom? I remember once walking into a client's office where an enormous org chart covered the wall. Boxes and lines frozen in time while everything outside was changing. It was a museum piece, a monument to how things used to work. Yet the organization's leaders still operated as if it was the reality. The truth is, the pyramids are crumbling. The old maps no longer match today's terrain. Leaders will say quietly, I know we can't keep leading this way, but I don't yet know how else to lead. That's recognition. The awareness that the systems we built for stability now stand in the way of adaptability. But awareness alone isn't enough. The next step is reorientation, learning to lead differently in a world that no longer plays by the old rules. So let's look briefly at how leadership has evolved. The industrial age was built on labor and control. The digital age maintained that focus on control while also looking at and engaging wisdom and speed. The age of wisdom must be built on connection, discernment, and purpose. Information is abundant. Anyone with access and with the ability to write the prompts effectively has the wisdom of everybody else in the world at their fingertips. I'm sorry, has the information that everybody else has at their fingertips. But wisdom, the ability to integrate head, heart, and gut with fortitude, has never been more essential. The head gives us clarity, seeing patterns and consequences. That's what artificial intelligence may be able to replicate. But the heart gives us compassion, understanding the human reality. And the gut gives us courage, that grounded instinct that says, this is right. And fortitude gives us endurance, the strength to stay grounded and present when the path is uncertain, when fatigue sets in, when change feels endless. When I was writing leading into the age of wisdom, ChatGPT was my brainstorming buddy. Sometimes it was right on point. Sometimes it was totally off target. Sometimes it emphasized things that were not as important as what I felt had to be addressed. And at all times, if I was stating facts, if I was needing a reference, I not only asked for verification, but I had to confirm it. I asked artificial intelligence, what is the difference between intelligence and wisdom? In essence, what it said is, I can tell you how to do anything you ask. Wisdom will tell you whether or not you should do it. In today's world, change no longer ends. Yes, some change still has a clear beginning, middle, and end, a new software, a merger, a rebrand. But more and more, change is ongoing. Technology evolves, markets shifts, cultures transform. We used to approach change like we were climbing one mountain at a time. Now the terrain itself keeps moving. That's why change can no longer be approached as a project. It's a practice. We need to develop the muscles of adaptation, learning, unlearning, and reimagining as an ongoing rhythm of leadership. But if you are a leader today, know that wisdom is no longer a solo performance. We have reached the limits of individual intelligence and individual wisdom. The complexity of our world demands collective wisdom. Let's think about it. Go back 25 years, consider the Fortune 500 from the year 2000. More than half of those companies no longer exist. Not because they weren't smart or profitable, but because they mistook intelligence for adaptability. They optimized for yesterday's reality and ignored the collective signals of tomorrow's change. One of those Fortune 500 in the year 2000 was Blockbuster. Remember them? Blockbuster had all the data. They knew their customers. They knew their margins. They knew their late fee revenues. By every analytic measure, they looked invisible. But they were trapped in individual wisdom, the internal logic of their own success. Netflix, on the other hand, tapped into collective wisdom, listening to cultural trends, emerging technologies, and human behavior patterns that no one executive could see alone. Blockbuster and Netflix intersected when the founders of Netflix went to see the CEO of Blockbuster to sell Netflix off for $50 million, the amount of their debt. The CEO of Blockbuster, based on his individual wisdom, refused the offer. He thought the path forward was to convince customers of the benefits they received in late fees, which was becoming a major source of income for Blockbuster. And today, we subscribe to Netflix. Blockbuster is gone. Collective wisdom emerges when diverse perspectives come together. When a team, a circle, a community listens deeply enough that new understanding arises between them. That's what the age of wisdom calls us to. Leadership as conversation, not command. There's another reorientation happening, one that strikes closer to the earth, one that strikes closer to home. The industrial age was obsessed with time. Clock in, clock out, measure the hours, fill the calendar, sit at your workstation until the boss leaves. Be at your workstation when the boss comes in. But we all know people don't run on time. They aren't productive based on time. They run on energy. They are productive based on their physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual energy. Time is finite. Energy is renewable. When we design our organizations to honor energy with rhythms of reflection, renewal, belonging, we unlock creativity, resilience, and joy. When we ignore it, burnout follows. Leading wisely means managing energy, not time, and modeling that for others. Reorientation also means rethinking structure. Hierarchy isn't totally disappearing, but it's not the only way forward. Unlike the industrial age hierarchical model of organizational design, in the age of wisdom, there's no single answer. There are a mosaic of possibilities that are being explored and experimented with. Self-managing teams where authority is distributed. Networked organizations that form and reform around purpose. Micro enterprises and holacracies that empower decision-making close to the work. Cooperatives that embed shared ownership and values. These alternative structures are solving real challenges. They're bridging silos, they're accelerating innovation, they're creating belonging, and they're reducing burnout. They remind us that form must follow function, and both must serve purpose. This is the work of reorientation, expanding our capacity to think, feel, and act differently in a world of constant motion. If the pyramids are crumbling, what rises in their place? Not chaos, but connection. Imagine organizations designed around belonging rather than control. Teams that move in alignment and rhythm rather than diverse directions and constant urgency. Leaders who measure success not just by what gets done, but by how energy, purpose, and humanity flow through their systems. And here is a vital truth. Diversity and belonging are not soft ideas. They are strategic imperatives. Homogeneity limits what an organization can see. Diversity expands its field of vision. When people from different backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives come together, and when they feel they belong, the organization becomes more adaptive, more innovative, more resilient. Belonging turns diversity from representation into resonance. It allows wisdom to move freely through the system. In the age of wisdom, diversity is not about compliance. It's about capacity. And belonging is not about comfort. It's about connection. Together, they are the foundation for collective wisdom. There's one more layer that holds it all together, the layer of spirit. Call it soul, essence, or love. It's the energy that breathes life into systems. Spirit is what turns a group of people into a community. It's what moves an organization from doing good work to doing meaningful work. And it's what reminds us that wisdom isn't just in what we know or even how we lead. It's in how we love, how we nurture, how we relate, how we care for those in our charge. One of the most powerful practices I've seen emerging is the wisdom circle. The wisdom circle is really a re-emergence, if you will, of indigenous practices from around the world. It's a structured yet open space where people pause, reflect, and listen to one another. No hierarchy, no agenda, no PowerPoint, just presence. The questions are simple. What are we learning? What's changing in us? What wisdom is present that we haven't yet named? What is the best path forward? Time after time, people walk away saying, that was the most productive time we've ever spent together. Because when we honor collective wisdom, new pathways appear. This is the essence of the shifts that are needed if we are to move into an age of wisdom, going from knowledge to being, going from leading change to living change, going from time pressure to energy alignment, going from head down execution to head, heart, gut, fortitude leadership. It's how we build organizations that are not only effective, but alive. We stand at a tipping point. Technology will keep advancing. AI will keep accelerating. But our future does not have to be defined by how smart our machines become. It can be defined by how wise we choose to be. And wisdom is always a choice. It's choosing to pause before reacting, to listen before deciding, to connect before commanding. But it's also choosing to act, to lead into the age of wisdom, and ultimately to lead with love, with spirit, with soul. This is what makes wisdom whole. The real call is to bring this conversation into your organization, to question what's no longer working, to design new rhythms of work that sustain energy and belonging, to invite your teams, your peers, your leaders into the practice of wisdom. And beyond that, to connect with others who are on this path, to join the circles, the dialogues, the experiments that are already forming, to become co-creators of the age of wisdom, because this new age won't arrive by accident. It will emerge from the choices we make and the leaders we become. The age of wisdom isn't some distant horizon. We're at the crossroads now. The question is, will you lead into the age of wisdom? Or will you follow others on the path? Or will you allow your organization to move into an age led by artificial intelligence? Thank you.
Brian Gorman, everyone. Brian, thank you so much for a just fantastic talk right there. Appreciate everything that you brought to the stage. I have a couple of quick questions for you, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
That's wonderful. Thank you, Rory.
Well, you got it. Would love to. I can tell how passionate you are about this topic. Anybody who's listening to you talk about this, this isn't just something that you wrote down, and took some notes on. This is something that means something to you. Um, is there a backstory there? Is there something, that led to you not only feeling the way you feel and advocating for what you are, but to writing the book and everything?
For many years, I said I am a baby boomer in a millennial body. I have never felt the rules made a whole lot of sense. And I have been working since the age of 13, which means about 1963. Um, this really got triggered for me when, yes, artificial intelligence was on my horizon. I was playing around with it a little bit when ChatGPT hit the got its sales, if you will. But um, it was when I started to hear we can replace people with AI. We can replace professions with AI. There was one CEO who proudly proclaimed he could be replaced with AI. And I said, first of all, I believe we find purpose in the work we do. And if we are putting all of these people out of work, where do they find purpose? And what are the implications socially, economically? But then as I really began to think about it, it dawned on me that AI is not an equivalent to a human being. It's equivalent to a human capacity, but not a human being. So as I began to think and write, you're right, the passion just built and built.
Wow. The book, Leading into the Age of Wisdom, Reimagining the Future of Work. At the time that this podcast airs, that book should be out on the shelf for everybody to pick up. So congratulations on publishing. The Give everybody an idea of what the book itself covers.
The book really covers in much more detail what I have talked about in this talk. Um, it delves into what is wisdom, where does wisdom come from? It looks at what is and what is not working in our continuing application of industrial age um, models and processes and mindsets. And then it explores alternatives. So, how do we refocus on energy instead of time? How do we create a culture? And why would we create a culture with belonging at the core rather than belonging as a thing we're supposed to be doing? Um, how do we use wisdom circles to capture the collective wisdom? What are, when we talk about networked organizations or holacracies or any of the other structures I mentioned, what are they like? How do we know that in some cases they work? So there are case studies, very, very brief, but case studies about applications of all of what I'm talking about.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
The last thing I want to add, Rory, is in the afterword, I talk about the fact that this is not a book to read and put down on the bookshelf. It really is, and hopefully you heard it in my talk, a call to action. And so each chapter ends with a series of questions for reflection that ask the reader to think about what they read and what has been their experience with that topic. What insights does that give them? And it invites them to bring those same questions to those they work with.
Wow. All right. Nice. The actionable steps is always a good thing for folks who are trying to make some changes. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that works. That's going to be great. When folks write books, I know that when I wrote mine, I felt this way. Possibly you did too. I'm curious. We often are writing the book to somebody, to a particular person, to a particular position, maybe even a particular, job of that type of thing, maybe managers or employees or, was there a particular, avatar that you were writing the book to or for when you put this together?
Maverick leaders,
Maverick leaders.
maverick leaders, leaders who not only know that some or much or a whole lot of what they and their organizations are doing are either failing, have failed, or are on the verge of failing, but leaders who have the wisdom and the courage to say, we need to make change. So if you think of, I guess the best example I can come is those lines outside of Apple stores before the iPhone launched. You know, most people today in at least in first world countries, most people today have a smartphone. But there were those groundbreakers. There were those early adapters, and that's who I'm writing to. There will be those leaders who forsake their leadership to artificial intelligence. and their organizations will suffer if they survive at all. And unfortunately, the people in those organizations will suffer as well. Um, if they pick up the book, maybe something will strike the chord, but that's not who it's for. That that is not the avatar that I had in mind.
Hmm.
It's those leaders who say, it's time for a change. I know things have to change. I may or may not know what needs to change. I may or may not have some idea of how to change it. But this is a book of collective wisdom drawn from, I mean, I have now either hosted or guested on probably over 300 podcasts. Um, my current podcast, I am releasing tomorrow, I believe, episode 141. I've probably read 80 or 100 books over the last 3 years to get to that number because I don't host a guest who has written a book if I haven't read the book. So I've collected that wisdom, and part of what feeds my soul is sharing it back out to the world, which is why the speaking and which is why the podcast and which is why Leading into the Age of Wisdom was written.
Wow. Nice. Love that. And you brought it up. The podcast is, it's called Conversations. Is that right?
Conversations,
Okay.
conversations,
All right.
spelled with a Q,
Got it.
which makes it look like conversations. I originally launched the podcast with a company that is no longer in business,
Mhm.
but their name started with a Q, and any place they could put a Q into a word, they did.
Got it. Okay. So that's a story behind the podcast too. Wonderful. And yeah, I did look that up. You have a very interesting podcast. You cover a little bit different topics on that, it sounds like, than just what you do in the book. You want to tell everybody a little bit about what they can expect on the podcast while you're here.
Many of the topics in the podcast are narrow views of pieces of what I cover in the book. But the podcast really focuses on the reality that we're all people. At the end of the day, we're all people. And so sometimes they're very personal stories. There's the story of a child actor and what that experience was like and what it is like now um, in his adult life. There's a very powerful story of um, an immigrant from South Africa who came to the United States as a child, um, who was obsessed with the television show Bonanza. And his family moved to Colorado while he was still young. When he graduated from high school, he became an equestrian trainer, um, moved into the world of technology, was always obsessed with success, which he equated with income. So became a millionaire before he hit 30, and along the way became an alcoholic, a drug addict, and a drug dealer, and lost everything,
Hmm.
and then reclaimed his life. So um, I really try again, whatever the topic, whoever the guest, to focus on stories, messages that we can learn from. There are no quick answers. This is not the 3 ways to become a multimillionaire next month kind of podcast.
Right.
But it is a podcast that says, pay attention. There's a lesson here for each and every one of us.
Nice. Very nice. Well, I love it. I love what you're doing. You're on a great mission right now, and that was one heck of a talk. So thank you for coming on here and doing that. Why don't you let everybody know where they can reach you, best ways to contact you, that type of thing, and we'll make sure it's in the show notes as well.
Great. People always want to know your LinkedIn profile. So I am definitely on LinkedIn. I actually post on LinkedIn several times a week. I also publish a weekly Substack. Going back to LinkedIn, I publish a bi-weekly newsletter called Enlightened Leadership. So you can find that there. Um, my email address is Brian, Brian, at transforminglives.coach. My website is transforminglives.coach. And I am very happy to talk with anyone about anything related to the work, the workplace leadership, and the future of work.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. All right, folks, you heard them. Reach out. The contact information will be in the show notes. The author of Leading into the Age of Wisdom, Reimagining the Future of Work, Brian Gorman, thank you for being on today, for putting out such a fantastic talk, and for everything else that you're doing and contributing to society. I have enjoyed listening to this today, and I just want to again thank you for being here. It was very, very informational for folks.
Thank you, Rory.
All right. Appreciate it. Folks, this has been another spectacular episode of Step Up to the Mic. If you're an aspiring or current speaker and you want to bring your talk to the masses, message us today. Never stop talking and let us help you to step up to the mic.